Hong Kong, March 1984. Two bodies were discovered buried in the flower bed of a luxury apartment complex. The victims' hands were tied and their legs were wrapped in a towel resembling a sacrificial ritual in ancient sorcery. But the most horrifying detail was yet to come. Upon closer examination, the police discovered that each corpse had 2 keys clenched tightly in their mouths, a total of 4 keys. What did this mean? A dark ritual? A message from the victims themselves? Or was it the mark of the killer? From the very beginning, the police faced countless difficulties. Numerous theories emerged, ranging from financial disputes and ransom kidnappings to gangland revenge or family conflicts. All the answers would gradually unfold in the intense investigation ahead. Like and subscribe to our channel as we uncover the truth right now. On March 30th, 1984, the police in Causeway Bay, Hong Kong, received a sudden call from a couple living in Elizabeth House, Mr. and Mrs. Chow. Their voices were filled with panic as they reported a strange, inexplicable stench lingering in their apartment for several days. At first, they thought it was the smell of garbage or sea breeze carrying odors. But oddly enough, even after sealing all windows and thoroughly cleaning every corner of the house, the stench did not fade. Instead, it grew stronger. In an attempt to locate the source, the Chows cleaned their apartment thoroughly at least twice, wiped down every wall, checked the bathroom, and even sprayed air fresheners everywhere. But all efforts were in vain. When they finally stepped onto the balcony, they realized the foul smell was emanating from the cement-sealed flower bed outside their window. What disturbed them even more was that they had never planted anything in this flower bed. Yet, there were some unfamiliar objects inside, as if someone had placed something there. Mr. Chow began removing all the items from the flower bed for inspection. As he reached the bottom, he discovered a large soaked cleaning cloth blocking a small drainage pipe. The moment he pulled out the cloth, a thick, black, foul-smelling liquid gushed out, releasing an unbearable stench that made both husband and wife gag uncontrollably. They immediately called the police, realizing this was far from normal. Upon receiving the report, the Causeway Bay police swiftly arrived at the scene. The Chow couple, an elderly pair residing in apartment A3, 26th floor, west wing of Elizabeth House. Both were in their 50s and had lived there for over a decade. Elizabeth House, built in 1978, consisted of 3 towers, A, B, and C, each 28 stories high, with a total of 468 apartments. The residential areas started from Tower B upwards, while the lower floors housed a shopping mall and parking lot. After assessing the situation, the police realized that the flower bed of apartment A3 was directly adjacent to apartment A2. Flower beds like these were common in Hong Kong during that era, designed to maximize space, not only for planting but also for storing miscellaneous items. However, what stood out was that the flower bed of apartment A3 had no plants whatsoever. It had only been used for storage, yet it now emitted an unbearably foul odor. This meant that the black, putrid liquid had to be leaking from the neighboring apartment A2. The police immediately went to apartment A2 and knocked several times, but there was no response. The prolonged silence only heightened their suspicions. At this point, the police contacted the building management to obtain information about the apartment's owner. The registered owner was a woman named Ms. Yip, but when reached, she said, "I'm not in Hong Kong. This apartment has been rented out for a long time." With no other choice, the police asked the building management to unlock apartment A2. Inside, the furniture was still neatly arranged, but one extremely unusual detail stood out. The flower bed outside the window had been sealed with fresh cement. At that moment, the police knew for certain that something had been deliberately hidden beneath that cement layer. Upon closer inspection, they noticed the drainage pipe had been completely blocked, preventing any wastewater from escaping. This explained why the black liquid had leaked through the connected pipes and into apartment A3. The stench became increasingly unbearable, forcing the officers to cover their noses as they continued investigating. Apartment A2 was immediately sealed off. The police didn't want any interference before conducting a thorough examination. On the morning of March 31, 1984, at 10 a.m., the police brought in 3 construction workers to begin dismantling the flower bed. The flower bed's dimensions were 2.6 meters long, 0.3 meters wide, and 1 meter deep. The surface was covered in an abnormally thick layer of concrete. After an hour of demolition, a small hole was finally drilled through the first concrete layer. The moment the drill pierced through, a foul, putrid gas escaped, filling the air with a horrific stench, like a long-abandoned morgue. The stench was so overwhelming that the construction workers had to retreat, unable to endure it. With no other choice, the police contacted the Hong Kong Fire Department for professional assistance. By 12 p.m., a team of experienced firefighters arrived on the scene, equipped with oxygen tanks, protective masks, and specialized demolition tools. By 2 p.m., the entire first layer of concrete was removed, but what they saw next left both the police and firefighters in complete shock. There was a second layer of concrete beneath it. The firefighters continued chiseling away at another layer of cement. After about an hour, the second layer of concrete was also completely removed. At this moment, the stench became more overwhelming than ever. Even with masks on, the firefighters felt nauseated due to the intense odor of decomposition. Once all the concrete was cleared, a horrifying sight emerged before them. Inside the flower bed lay a corpse tightly wrapped in a bedsheet. But that wasn't the worst part. As the forensic team extracted the body, they uncovered a second corpse, also wrapped in white fabric, stacked on top of the first. The 2 bodies had decomposed severely, making age and facial identification extremely difficult. However, based on bone structure and body size, they were identified as 2 adult Asian men. The victims were tightly wrapped in white cloth, stacked on top of each other in a strange position. Their hands were tied, and their heads and legs were also completely covered with white fabric. A more terrifying discovery followed. Both victims had 4 keys forcibly stuffed in their mouths. The keys bore strange symbols, unlike any ordinary keys. Besides the bodies, the police also found a blood-stained iron hammer, 2 green talismans, 2 half-empty beer cans, a few English magazines, and a pack of screws. The blood-stained hammer appeared to be the murder weapon, but investigators were puzzled by the 2 green talismans. These talismans were extremely rare, featuring symbols related to wuxing and the bagua, often used in ancient spiritual rituals. Was this part of a summoning ritual, a curse, or merely a ruse by the perpetrator to mislead investigators? Upon further inspection, the police discovered 2 name tags placed beside the bodies, each inscribed with a name, Stephen and George. Using these clues, the police immediately checked recent immigration records. They found that 2 men named Stephen and George had entered Hong Kong a month earlier. According to records from the Peninsula Hotel in Tsim Sha Tsui, Kowloon, these 2 had stayed there for several days before disappearing. They carried 2 suitcases labeled with their names. But were these names real, or were they just aliases? The death flower bed case quickly caught the attention of the media. Newspapers across Hong Kong rushed to publish sensational headlines, triggering widespread fear among the public. Many residents of Elizabeth House became terrified, wondering whether they had unknowingly lived next to a serial killer. Several chilling theories emerged. Some believed that Stephen and George were assassins, eliminated to cover up a bigger plot. Others suspected a ritualistic murder tied to dark sorcery. Under mounting public pressure, the Hong Kong police faced immense scrutiny and were forced to accelerate their investigation to find the killer as soon as possible. At this point, the forensic results came back, revealing a crucial detail. The victims' stomachs contained a high dose of sedatives. This proved that they had been drugged before being murdered. Furthermore, the cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation. This meant that after they were killed, their bodies were stuffed into the flower bed and encased in cement. Based on the clues collected, the police reconstructed the crime scene. They determined that the two victims had been drugged before being murdered. This also meant that the iron hammer found at the scene was not the murder weapon. It had been placed there deliberately to mislead the investigation. Upon examining apartment A2, the police noticed signs that multiple people had lived there, confirming that the perpetrator wasn't acting alone. The owner of apartment A2, Miss Yip, was summoned for questioning. When asked about the tenant, she provided a crucial name, Abdul Karm. According to Miss Yip, in early March 1984, a man named Abdul Karm had contacted her through a rental advertisement. He claimed that he was coming to Hong Kong to invest in business and needed a place to stay. Abdul agreed to pay $5,800 per month for the apartment, signing a 3-month lease on March 6, 1984. He mentioned that 2 Indonesian men would later move in with him, but they did not sign any official lease and were only staying as his guests. The apartment manager confirmed that Abdul Karm left apartment A2 about 2 weeks before the bodies were discovered, right after the murders had taken place. But who were the 2 Indonesian men that Abdul mentioned? Could they have been the victims found in the flower bed? To dig deeper, the police began gathering witness statements from the residents of Elizabeth House. Some residents claimed they had seen both men and women coming and going from apartment A2, but no one knew their exact identities. A resident living directly below recalled hearing loud arguments from apartment A2 about 3 weeks before the bodies were discovered. The witness stated, "I heard a man screaming for help, followed by a woman shouting in a foreign language. Then, everything went silent." Another resident on the 25th floor, just below apartment A2, reported hearing strange noises about 2 weeks before the case was exposed. They described the sounds as heavy objects being dragged across the floor, along with loud thuds as if a violent struggle had taken place. Another key witness stated that 3 weeks earlier, a dark-skinned man and a young woman were seen using the elevator to transport cement bags to the 26th floor. Based on the compiled reports, the police suspected that the man transporting the cement was Abdul Karm, and the woman accompanying him could be his accomplice. Additionally, the police narrowed down the time frame of the crime to around March 15, 1984, exactly 2 weeks before the bodies were discovered. 3 days later, during a thorough examination of the evidence, a blood-stained business card was found stuck within the cement layers. The business card bore the logo of a famous gemstone jewelry company, but strangely, this company was not based in Hong Kong. It was in Singapore. Tracing this clue, the police discovered that half a month before the crime, 2 Singaporean businessmen had entered Hong Kong. They were the Lee brothers, Philip Lee and Thomas Lee. Both had checked into the Peninsula Hotel in Tsim Sha Tsui, one of the most luxurious hotels of the era. What was suspicious was that upon arrival, they did not use their real names. Instead, they registered under false identities, Stephen and George. 3 days after entering Hong Kong, both suddenly disappeared. Their luggage and personal belongings remained in their hotel room, showing no signs of a hurried departure. Given the timeline of their disappearance and the forensic evidence found at the scene, the police began to suspect that the 2 bodies in the flower bed were actually Philip Lee and Thomas Lee. To confirm their hypothesis, Hong Kong police contacted Singapore authorities, requesting fingerprint and dental X-ray comparisons with archived records. After hours of forensic analysis, the final results were announced. The bodies found buried in the flower bed were indeed the Lee brothers. They were the sons of businessman Michael Lee, founder of one of Singapore's leading gemstone jewelry corporations. Michael Lee started his business in 1953, initially a small jewelry shop, but thanks to his sharp business acumen, he expanded to 7 more stores, establishing his brand across Malaysia, Indonesia, and other Southeast Asian countries. The Lee family had 8 children, 5 sons and 3 daughters. Among them, Philip Lee was the eldest son, while Thomas Lee was the 3rd son. Both played a crucial role in managing their family's business, particularly Thomas Lee, who was considered the most intelligent and business-savvy among his siblings. But what led to their brutal murder? Who were they involved with? And could this case be connected to a dark financial conspiracy? Delving deeper into the victims' personal lives. The older brother, Philip Lee, had just married 6 months earlier. His wife was a Chinese Myanmar woman from a wealthy family, whose parents owned a large transportation company. Meanwhile, Thomas Lee had a longtime girlfriend, and they were preparing to get married. Interestingly, her family was also in the gold trading business, and the two had grown up together like childhood sweethearts. Beyond managing their family empire, the brothers had even bigger ambitions. 2 years before the murder, they had established their own gold trading company, expanding their operations to Hong Kong and Macau. Their business was immensely successful, gaining them respect and admiration in the industry for their wealth and sharp business acumen. When the murder was uncovered, Singaporean media exploded with coverage, turning the deaths of the Lee brothers into front-page headlines. Back to the key suspects. The police now needed to track down Abdul Karim and the 2 Indonesian men who lived with him. Upon further investigation, they made a shocking discovery. Abdul Karim was a completely fake identity. Not only had he used a false identity, but even the documents he provided to rent the apartment were forged. The 2 Indonesian men living with him were not just his friends, they were his biological brothers. Abdul Karim was also linked to the gold trade. He frequented an Indonesian restaurant near Causeway Bay, where he introduced himself as a gold dealer. However, despite the leads, the police could not track them down. At the time, Hong Kong's immigration system was not as strict as it is today, allowing foreigners to easily enter with fake identities. The investigation was hitting a dead end. With few options left, Hong Kong police shifted their focus to retracing the movements of the Lee brothers, analyzing their travel history between Singapore, Indonesia, and Hong Kong in the 3 months leading up to the murder. The 2 men had a frequent travel history, mainly revolving around a mysterious gold transaction. All leads pointed to one name, an Indonesian businessman who allegedly owed $3 million but refused to pay. According to investigative reports, the Lee brothers met with the Indonesian businessman at least 3 times to negotiate. The first meeting was in Singapore, the second in Indonesia, and the final one in Hong Kong, where they never left alive. A month before the murder, the Lee brothers arrived in Hong Kong with 2 diamond traders. They checked into the Peninsula Hotel in Sim Sha Tsui, planning to check out after 3 days. On the last night before they went missing, they had dinner with the 2 traders. A month later, the diamond traders waited for the scheduled follow-up meeting with the Lee brothers, but never heard from them again. When they read about the bodies discovered in the flower bed, they immediately contacted the police. A close friend of Thomas Lee revealed that he traveled to Hong Kong at least once a month. On February 28, 1984, he and his brother Philip Lee arrived in Hong Kong with 2 men and a woman. One of them, a man with the surname Lau, was a well-known figure in the local gold trading scene. But after the murder, all 3 companions mysteriously vanished without a trace. Another theory suggested that the deaths of the Lee brothers weren't just about money. They may have been linked to romantic disputes and underworld conflicts. As wealthy businessmen who frequently traveled between countries, they could have offended a powerful crime boss, leading to their assassination. Another source claimed that Thomas Lee was kidnapped upon arriving in Hong Kong. The kidnappers demanded $1 million Singapore dollars from his father, Michael Lee, as ransom. Fearing for his son's safety, Michael Lee did not contact the police and instead sent Philip Lee to Hong Kong with $500,000 to negotiate. But upon arrival, the kidnappers betrayed them, taking the money and murdering both brothers. Yet another conspiracy theory suggested that the Lee brothers were caught in a family power struggle. The Lee family had 8 children, and serious disputes had arisen over the family business. When Singaporean police questioned the remaining family members, they showed little grief or concern over Philip and Thomas Lee's deaths. This raised suspicions. Could one of their own have orchestrated the murders? This case wasn't just confined to Hong Kong. It also involved Singapore and Indonesia. This legal jurisdiction issue created major obstacles in the investigation, slowing down progress. Without solid evidence, Hong Kong police gradually lost momentum in pursuing the case. Over time, the public moved on, and the case faded into obscurity, turning into an unsolved mystery for decades. This case remains one of Hong Kong's 4 greatest unsolved mysteries, known as the Hong Kong 4 Great Mysteries. Another strange event occurred 26 years later. Philip Lee's wife, Nancy Chung, committed suicide by self-immolation in her home under mysterious circumstances. According to close sources, Nancy was a gambling addict who spent extravagantly. She was obsessed with the number 4. Her house address, car license plate, and even her wardrobe and shoes all had connections to the number. This led many to speculate about the 4 keys found inside the mouths of the Lee brothers. Was there a hidden connection between these events? Could these details be part of a larger scheme? Was the tragic fate of the Lee brothers preordained? And if so, who was the mastermind behind it all? Perhaps Nancy Chung was the only one who knew the truth. But now, she has taken all those secrets to the grave. What do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. That concludes this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling crime stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.